So we keep getting flashbacks of previous and previous and previous times. So in terms of like what happened in the story, well, like how are these sections of this story linked together? What are the order of these flashbacks? We started with the funeral, and you're gonna notice I like doing these little arrows here, right? We could write this in a full complete sentence, which could end up in a paragraph. We don't need to. The whole point of this is just some, it's to help you 7 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now. So we started with the funeral, and we ended up talking about her father's death. So when her father died, when she was about 30, something like that.
Wouldn't this be number 7 too?
Wouldn't this be number? Oh, you're right. It's kind of. Number 5 asks about the flashbacks. Number 7 will go chronological though. Yeah. Because this is already broken the chronology, because we started at the funeral, we went to when she was 30, but then we went to like, later when she was like, with the tax notice. So this does break a lot of the chronological stuff. So we got the tax notice, the smell develops. These are just the flashbacks. We get flashbacks about when she met Baron Homer Baron. I forget which. She buys the arsenic, and they find the body in the house. So those are just the order of our flashbacks. This will change though with question 7. So I think we're going to actually go straight to question 7 here. So it's question 7. So now we're talking about it chronologically. This is in sequence, right? From start to finish. If you're not talking about your life chronologically, is, you were born and then you learned how to walk and then you started going to school and, so it's literally in order. The above was not in order. So this has a couple questions. We're going to start with just going over the plot. This is a long question. So, here's what we know. So if we're starting from the start of the time in the story, we know that she came from a rich family. And in it, we know that her father won't let Emily marry. So throughout her 20s, he's turning away potential suitors. We know the dad dies when Emily is 30 years old. We know the taxes are remitted. Hey, you don't need to pay your taxes anymore, right? They did that out of pity for her. So once her dad dies, she doesn't pay taxes, but you still need money to live, right? So what does she end up doing? She ends up hosting China lessons until she's 40.
What is that?
It was I think it was painting like China, like painting like cups and plates and stuff. Yeah. Now, it's something that's useful to know is this hosting China lessons, that happens for a couple of years. It just starts here. We know eventually, though, midway between this, she meets Homer Barron, right? Who's the laborer, who's working on the road. We know that her cousins visit, her 2 cousins. And while they're visiting, Homer goes away. We know that she does eventually go and buy arsenic, for rat poison, quote unquote. So here's where it gets a little bit weird. So we had mentioned that, hey, she marries Homer, right? We don't have any direct evidence of that. It's entirely like, in fact, we have some evidence that they might not have, because Homer, if you recall, was not a marrying man. He's a closet gay in this time. And quote unquote, he's not a marrying man. So there's the very real potential that they never actually got married. She just killed him and then dressed him up in it. So maybe marries Homer, question mark. We don't know. And that's one of the things that is debated about with this story to this day, as to whether or not they actually got married. But we do know that, she eventually ends up killing him. And then that's kind of like the end of the story. Then we just jump to the present, which is, sorry, other than that, there's the tax issues as well. Tax repayment, which is a lot older. Like, hey, we got to start charging this woman taxes again, basically. And we jump to the present where, of course, Emily dies, 74 years old. So what do? Okay, well, we got to do something about this house now. Like, let's clear it out at least. We have to hand off this estate to her cousins or something. So Emily dies. They go in, and what do they find? They find Homer's body. So on this bed for the last 30, 40 years was Homer just sitting there. But what was found beside him? Anyone remember? Yeah, some gray hair. Her hair is gray. So we know that she was laying beside him at some point.
Was Homer gay?
Yeah, that seems to be really like, well, it's outright mentioned that he frequents men. He's not a marrying kind. We don't know at the time. I mean, this was honestly, I don't know if even like when this was written, the concept of like bisexuality was even well known or believed in. Well, I mean, that's just it. Like you were either heterosexual or you were targeted as like a gay person, right? Like that, it was pretty black and white back in those days. So I'm gonna go ahead and say like no, just because like I don't think the concept really existed much there, or rather, it was talked about or minded. I mean, it's a good question. So, do you guys remember when her father died? How did she take that? How did she take her father's death?
They didn't want to bury him.
You're right. She didn't want to bury him. It's not even that she didn't want to bury him. She didn't want to acknowledge it. And do you remember for how long?
3 days.
3 days. So for 3 days, quote unquote, he's not dead. They showed up at her door, like, "Hey, we got to start planning this funeral." No, he's not dead. So he's not dead for 3 days. That's what she keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating. How come she was such in denial of this, that her father died?
He was the only one that she had, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Her father was the only person in her life. And how come he was the only person in her life? Yeah, he chased away her family and potential like suitors, right? Potential like guys who want to date or marry her. So the reality is here is she couldn't accept the reality that she was now alone. That's it. It's just her. No money, no inheritance besides the house, no suitors, and a bunch of trauma. So she basically kind of has no one and nothing. Let's talk about 10. Let's talk about Emily and her personality. Like, what do we think about her and her personality? She's very stubborn. How come? Or stubborn about what?
Townspeople.
Yeah, it's mentioned a couple times in the story that what is that? Are they the Greasons that they think they're better than everyone else, right?
Well, part of
Entitlement's a good word. There seems to be an entitlement there. She's stubborn. She's entitled. She doesn't like change and can't move on. She can't even seem to accept reality. So how come she acts this way? Why does she act stubborn? Why does she act why does she like change? Why can't she move on? Why doesn't she believe reality? And guesses?
maybe his father. Robert out there.
Could have been, maybe it's because of a poor upbringing. Maybe it's just because like how her trauma is let out. Is it possible that maybe she has a mental illness? You could probably make a fair argument for that. And that's not to say that she was born with one, but it could be how her upbringing was led to that potentially. It's open for debate, of course, but it's very possible that she might have a mental illness here. And I just want to go to the last one, question 17 to finish up. The title. So the title is called A Rose for Emily. Were roses that mentioned at all in the actual short story? Roses themselves, no. Ooh. But oops, rose itself is mentioned, not rose the flower, but rose the color. We can see at the very end, we see we see rose, specifically when they break into this wall or into room that has Homer sitting in it, his body laying in it. The curtains are a rose color. There's rose shaded lights. The wallpaper's rose colored. So the rooms look rose, like pink rose. So if it's a rose for Emily, her potential love of her life, person she really likes spending time with, was kind of put to rest there. So, so the rose symbolizes things. It symbolizes her life, the death of potential suitors, and the death of a future. Like her life kind of stopped when her dad died, right? And so we saw early in the story where she was looking down out of this room at like someone who was sneaking around in her property, right? She was upstairs in this room looking down at it. She was looking through literally rose colored glass. Has anyone ever heard of that saying before? Has anyone ever heard of the saying of rose colored windows, rose colored glasses?
Isn't that a song by? Um,
The Beatles?
oh,
It's definitely a song for sure. There'll be a bunch. I don't remember like who done it, who had sung it, but it does exist. But so rose like color. Look, if you're looking through rose colored glass or rose colored glasses, you're not seeing things right, right? Things are a different color. So it's kind of an analogy that someone is looking at the world differently than everyone else is. So this is an analogy that Emily was looking at the world differently than everyone else. It's a common phrase, essentially. So not only was she looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, like a tint, like she's looking at the world differently than how it actually is. You know, if I, you know, right now, if you're looking at the screen, it's white, right? If I put on those glasses, it's pink. But because it's a two, you know, windows are two-way. So she's looking at the world differently. But the townspeople who the townspeople are looking at Emily through rose-colored glasses. Not literally, they're not literally looking at her through those glasses, but through that analogy, right? They look at her differently than how she is. They kind of see her as this, you know, sad, a bitter woman, when in reality, she probably again was, you know, mentally ill. She had lots of trauma kind of thrust upon her. So it's different between America and yeah, I probably should. It's just like muscle memory at this point. Like it's the that got like beat into me when I was in grade school. You got to put the U in, and like now everyone just in Canada it's popular to do that. Yeah, but it's only Canada.
There's like two different.
Mhm.
Behavior is IOR and IOUR.
Yeah,
And it's the same with labor.
yeah, I never actually connected those two words before either. But you're right.
Cause it says that I'm slowing labor around in the grid on the computer.
Okay. So did anyone have any questions about any of the other questions that we haven't gone through? Hearing none, okay. So that's the end of A Rose for Emily. So we have one more short story for this section, and then that's it. Then we're moving on from the human qualities one to our next one. So